So there's this thing. So they were talking about edibles earlier.
Yeah.
So when you're looking, so in the event that somebody lives in a state or a country where marijuana is legal, there's actually a couple of things to keep in mind, just for safety for everybody watching this. So if the difference between those things is that joints, pipes, anything that burns the leaf, if you will, that will have the drug get to the alveoli in your lungs very quickly and get absorbed into the blood and have a very quick reaction for you. That's why people can like smoke a pipe and then get high very quickly, and there's no real delay. If they go with edibles, drinkables, anything that has to, especially edibles, anything that has to be processed in the stomach first, that's going to delay it by several hours. Anything like a tincture, which is water, basically, it's like an oil. You usually put that under your tongue. That's going to have a different effect that comes in waves, like 4 phases or something like that. So keep in mind the rule with edibles is you're not going to know how high you're going to be until it actually hits. Do not be that person at a convention, you know who you are, who decides to start eating edibles until they feel something, because by the time you feel something, it's too late.
just high. It's just high like Chase. Just wake up on the floor. Everyone's like,
I
"Oh my
mean,
god! Oh my god! He died! Oh my god! Oh my god!"
let me put it this way: they'll start getting high, they'll be having a good time, and they'll be dancing and dancing and dancing, and they'll be getting higher and higher and higher and higher and higher and dancing and dancing and dancing, and eventually they just go poof, horizontal on the ground because
They
they're
plink.
way too high,
They just
and then
plink.
your friends panic and like put them into a bed, that kind of thing. Don't do that. So one thing that people will do if they want to be really high and maintain that is they'll consume an edible and then they'll smoke a joint or something along those lines. Because what ends up happening then is the edible is kind of it's odd that Chase passes out, so I don't think he had one muffin. I think he ate a lot of muffins. Is that an edible is kind of like a lower intensity high that lasts for like 12 hours,
Oh shit.
right? But it's a low intensity high. So they're going to feel like they took a few hits on a joint and that's about it. It's a different high from people inhaling the drug and it going directly into their bloodstream, but it's still a high. It's just not as intense. Um, there's also like marijuana ice cream, which people will eat, which is usually highly, highly concentrated. Like they can get so high they'll hallucinate. But generally, you don't want that kind of stuff. Um, Yeah. So one thing that people can do is they can eat an edible, and when the sensation of the edible seems to stabilize, then they can hit a joint, and they'll get really high. They'll get like a joint level of high, and they'll stay that high for 12 hours, if that's what they really want to do. I can't imagine doing that on a regular basis.
Mm.
I can't imagine any of that stuff on a regular basis because it's just like, why? I mean, maybe that's what they have to do to calm down, or they have a job that's fine with that, or that's what they have to do to de-stress or something. But whenever the opportunity for that has ever come up, it's always been something where it's like, okay, this might be fun for science, but I mean, it's relatively expensive compared to just like a bottle of beer or something. So yeah, it never really seemed like it was worth the cost to me, but I also understand that I have a fairly nice life. Um, there are people out there with a lot of stuff going on, and they're turning to the drug for a different reason
Yeah.
instead of just recreation strictly. But neither here nor there.
Yeah.
Um, But is what it is. But yeah, I really think Chase probably got something that was hyper concentrated for some reason, and no one told him or something like that.
Could be.
But yeah, could be. Anyway,
Hi, fan.
I'm driving down the road alongside the lake. Carl's sitting next to me. He's in the chair that he broke. I keep telling him to wear his seatbelt, but he won't. I turn down a road I don't remember. It goes straight down towards the lake. What was that?
And someone else had joined the chat. They're gone now. It was like fire someone.
It was probably Pyro. For some reason, I can't stop. I brace myself for the impact, but I hardly feel anything. We just glide into the lake. I start trying to take off the seatbelt, but it's stuck. I look over at Carl, who smiles before opening the door. Water rushes in, and he starts to step out. As soon as the water is over my head, and it doesn't matter that I'm an otter. Tuesday. All right, well, good stream, everyone. I'll see you later.
Bye, everyone.
No.
No.
You still recording?
Yes.
Good.
I do want to ask, since we are on the next day, what's your experience like with marijuana and THC? Because mine's real simple. I have none. I've been around people who've smoked or eaten edibles before. I know people that do it, but I've never bought it. I've never smoked it. Never drank it. I pretty much just, my only two drugs are caffeine and alcohol.
So I mean, my experience with that kind of recreational drug culture is, in university, I had a roommate who had this huge glass bong that he would use. And so, like, we used to, after we'd finish up everything that we needed to do for class, there'd be nothing else to do. So, and the internet there was pretty crappy. And so he'd be like, hey, you want to check out this thing? And I'm just like, you know what? I'm down with new experiences. Let's give it a shot and see what happens. And so I've smoked bongs, I've eaten edibles, I've done all kinds of, stuff like that. I've always tried to avoid doing stuff that's highly addictive. So whenever I look at something where it's going to be very addictive, where it is going to, where it has like a high addiction rate, there's actually a graph out there in terms of drugs. Yeah, drug addiction rate chart. So there is, yeah, I mean, this one kind of works. Well, let's see. There's nothing weird. Not like cybering with some robot AI that's tied up in a warehouse and missing limbs for some reason. Carl.
That was funny.
All right, so this is the chart. I have it on stream now. And this is the dependence to physical harm chart. You can also think about dependence as being like dangerous to society as well, because the more is, look at it like this. So you can say the physical harm is the harm to the user, and dependence is harm to society. It is typically how it's viewed in that way, or that's how this graph is typically portrayed. So So if we look at, say, dependence, anabolic steroids, which bodybuilders use, like that doesn't harm society all that much. Like no one's really going to care. However, harm to the individual is it's pretty bad. It's not the worst thing, but it's it's okay-ish. So it's like a 1.5 out of 3. It's you know,
I'm just
and
trying to look
then we
this up.
have other things.
I'm trying to look it up
Um,
myself so I can put it into my video.
um, here I'll just post a link to it in chat. There you go.
I think I found it.
And so, you have tobacco, which is actually really bad for society. It doesn't really harm you that much. You have alcohol, which is also pretty bad for society, but it harms you about as much as it does anabolic steroids. And then you have stuff like LSD and cannabis and khat, which is popular in, I think, the Middle East and India. I think it's a leaf that you can chew on that is hallucinogenic or something. But I think it's supposed to be like a low end on it. I don't know anything about alkyl nitrates.
Okay, haven't.
I think
Here we go.
I don't know if methylphenidate is meth
I'm looking at heroin.
or if
It's like
that's
way up in the corner, so
yeah,
it's
the heroin's horrible. Never do heroin. Or if street methadone is what people call meth.
might be real. But Mr. White
Um,
was cooking up.
yeah, but there's methadone and then there's methylphenidate. Methylphenidate.
What
And
I've Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I don't know the difference between those two.
What I've always heard and what I've always understood is that ecstasy or acid it has always it's not very
Ecstasy is not acid.
well, it's not what am I thinking of? Is that LSD? Well,
LSD is acid.
oh, either way,
LSD
they're
24 specifically.
whatever regardless, like those are like they're not very addictive, which kind
No,
of surprised me.
ecstasy is they're not really addictive. What they effectively do. Also, hello everyone. Welcome to Fen and Terry's
Drug corner,
symposium
drug
on
corner.
drugs. Don't do heroin or cocaine or barbiturates if you can avoid them, or street methadone. Anything in red, don't do them. Anything in orange, don't do them.
Now, where's
And if
caffeine on
you,
here? I see
I don't
alcohol.
think caffeine's listed because it's just so ubiquitous that no one's gonna bother.
Yeah, I see tobacco, alcohol. Tobacco
Yeah,
is
tobacco and alcohol are both really bad for you.
both the two most legal things.
They're really legal because there's major industries behind them. That's why they're really legal.
Yeah.
Like alcohol is extremely legal because there is a worldwide industry about getting people drunk. Like that is the entire reason alcohol is legal. If it wasn't for the fact that it had just tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of money behind it, alcohol would be flat out illegal or controlled.
Same thing with tobacco. Only it's not
Same thing with
nearly as
tobacco.
strong as it was before. Like back in like from like what the 50s or before all the way up to what was it like the 90s, like tobacco was like hella strong, had huge lobbies and everything.
Yeah,
And then all these
yeah,
movements started to like put it down.
yeah, it was basically just, hey, everybody smokes, and if you don't smoke, what's wrong with you, basically. And then alcohol, everybody drinks. If you don't drink, what's wrong with you? Benzodiazepines, if I remember correctly, those are used in like detox meds. But I think I mean, benzos are their own classification of drug too. I think Valium is a benzo.
Oh,
Um,
amphetamine, ketamine. What is cat?
COTS is a drug that is popular in South Asia and the Middle East, if I remember correctly. I've met a handful of people who have used it, like in rehab and stuff like that. But
It's not dependent. It's not.
that would be something. I think it's like a stimulant or a light hallucinogen,
Oh, okay.
but I'm not sure.
It's almost it's less. It's less bad than cannabis. Just about
I
everywhere.
think you can literally just buy it in convenience stores in the Middle East and in South Asia. Like it's that uncontrolled.
Oh wow.
I could be completely wrong, but I mean, you know.
There's solvents,
By
which
the
I guess
way,
is
so
like
when you
spray paint
see
and stuff.
when you see heroin, imagine that is all opioids all mixed together is up there. Unless you see an opioid somewhere else. So like Vicodin can be just as bad as heroin in its own way. So like Vicodin is an opioid, morphine is, heroin is, fentanyl is. To give you an idea of where fentanyl would be on this graph, imagine that there's like a 6 on both axes, and now it's the only one that's up there.
It's like way up in the corner.
Yeah, just imagine that there's an infinity sign, and then
That's fentanyl.
that's where fentanyl is right now. Probably up there with crocodile.
So I
Never do either of those.
yeah, those both are fucking horrible for you. Now,
By the way, I must warn you guys right now: do not look up images of crocodile drug. Don't do it. Trust me, you don't want to see what that thing does to people.
oh,
You
was
don't
it
want to see it.
really
Once you've
bad?
seen it, you can't unsee it.
Was it really bad? Like nightmare fuel?
Um, Basically, with perfect use, a person is going to live for like 9 months. With imperfect use, it causes the injection area to completely dry out and die.
Oh fuck.
So yeah, you can see bone on living people in some areas. Wonderful.
I think I've seen
Don't go look it up.
I think I've seen that before.
I'm pretty sure a lot of teenagers will be like, yeah, I'm going to go look it up because it's great. And they'll traumatize themselves like we all did. But I'm telling you right now, don't look it up. I do not endorse it. I want to look up some of this other stuff. So
No, I think we should also
I look up street methadone, and the first thing I get is a hotline for a crisis line.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, if you ever wants to look up a drug and see if it's going to be a bad idea to take it, if the first thing that pops up after you do a search for that drug is as a certain hotline that that YouTube probably won't appreciate, yeah, you probably shouldn't take that drug. Uh, just saying. Okay, so methadone is an opioid. Oh, okay, so we can use it for treatment for people going through opioids. Okay.
So one thing I think might be interesting to talk about since we're doing this nice big tangent is physical and psychological dependence on drugs. The difference between
So
those.
if it's so in this case, I think what you're specifically getting at is so when it comes to any kind of drug, Like, people will take a drug and they'll think, wow, this was really fun. I like this. And then they'll do it again. But they don't have a dependency on it yet. They're not addicted to it. Instead, they're just like, that was fun. I think I'll have a second energy drink. Or I think I'll I think I'll have an extra cup of coffee because the first one made me feel so great. That kind of thing. So that, I guess, might be what you mean by a psychological dependency. It's literally just they're not addicted yet, and it's possible they might never become addicted, but they enjoyed themselves quite a bit. Now, the more extreme version of that is the drug kind of bypasses the cerebellum entirely and just goes straight to the midbrain. And basically, what ends up happening then is what we call addiction, which is where your desire for this drug has effectively hijacked your midbrain. And what this translates to is your midbrain tells you what to do. So when you decide that you are hungry, your midbrain says, hey, idiot, you're hungry, go eat something. And so, when you're done drooling and you decide to wipe the drool off your lip, you go and you eat something. And your midbrain says, good job, here's dopamine, enjoy. The dopaminergic pathway for motivation to do things is incredibly strong in humans. It's really the reason why you do the vast majority of what you do. So also feel free to fact check me on things. Like, feel free to jump in. So what ends up happening is, anyway, so that you're hungry, so you eat food. You're horny, so you go find someone to sleep with, or you take care of that problem on your own. You feel tired, so you rest. You feel, it feels like it hurts to do things. Maybe you're out running. So instead of continuing to run, you take a rest. And your body says, good job, you did it. And then it proceeds to give you dopamine. Okay. Well, when you get to a psychological addiction to where someone becomes an addict, the brain is literally saying the optimal solution to all of my problems is the drug. Because when you take a drug, it typically gives you a massive amount of dopamine. It can also give you serotonin and oxytocin. I think tocin's the neurotransmitter. I think Oxycontin is the neurotransmitter. I mean, Oxycontin is the drug, and oxytocin is the neurotransmitter. But it could be wrong. Could be the other way around. Anyway,
I think the first one you said is the drug.
The tocin?
Yeah.
Or the cotton?
I think they're both drugs. Are you talking about acetaminophen?
No, there's an oxy something that is a neurotransmitter. I just don't remember the name.
I think I can actually solve. I once had a good look at that. Oh, off like this.
Okay, so it's not oxycodone. That's a synthetic opioid. Oxytocin is a hormone. So yeah, oxytocin is the love hormone.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the cuddle hormone. It's when you pick up your cat and you hug your cat and you feel really good. That's oxytocin. Or you pet your dog, or you find someone that you really like and you hug them, and then the screen turns black. Yeah, that's oxytocin. So the book fades to black. And then you get arrested. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Okay. Okay, so um yeah, so the psychological addiction is where the person is kind of enjoying the middle brain is basically saying this drug gives me so much dopamine that it kind of just blows everything else out of the water in terms of the dopaminergic pathway, in terms of how much motivation I get from using the drug. And as a result of that, your body prioritizes that drug for every need. I'm tired, drug. I'm horny, drug. I'm sleepy, so drug. I'm hungry, drug. I'm bored, drug. Like that's when you start getting to that psychological dependency, that addiction. There's and this is really what kind of destroys people's lives because it's one most of the drugs that they're doing are illegal. And so unfortunately this leads to a situation where they need to go to what are known as trap houses or trap hotels or traps. These things are called traps because they're basically traps for people. Yeah, you go in and they have a little bit of something on a string for you. And so you go and you take the thing on the string. You go and you grab the cheese, basically, and you eat it. You use it. And now that you have done this, the trap kind of has its teeth in you because there's a chance that you'll never come back. You'll be like, well, that LSD was fun, but that was a waste of $20. It was fun for 12 hours, and now there's nothing else for me to really do with it, so I'm just going to leave and go do something else. Okay, perfectly valid. Perfectly fine. Congratulations. You're the mouse that went, pulled some cheese off of the trap, and got away. But a lot of people who do this, they go into the trap. They're like, man, I've got a lot of stuff going on. What do you got that's good? And this dealer says, how about this? And so you try this. And next thing you know, tomorrow or next week or next month, you're going back to the trap for a little bit more of that because your life is becoming more unsufferable. It's becoming harder. And so you go, get your new drug of choice from the trap and then you go home. And then what ends up happening is the time frame between going and getting more or going and getting your next hit sort of starts to compress. So instead of it being once every year or it starts off, it's once a year, then it's once every 6 months, then it's once every 3 months. Before you know it, you're going there once a week, then every other day, and then it's every day, sometimes multiple times per day. And so it's when it's referred to as a trap, it's a trap for you. Because when you make the mistake of going anywhere near it, you're screwed. There's a good chance it sinks the top of the mousetrap into you, and now you're stuck. And the thing is, a lot of these people die. Um, it's not great. They get unalived by the substance, by complications from it, because a lot of this stuff is just really hard on your organs. And I want to drive this point home. Just because somebody is addicted to something doesn't mean that they are bad. That's a really important thing. It doesn't mean that they're lost causes or anything. Like you will have lawyers, doctors, CEOs who are using all these illegal substances. You'll have, I mean, it's possible you literally go to your therapist for like treatment for your drug addiction, and your therapist, after seeing all 40 of their clients because they really need the money, that week, goes home and just like uses all the drugs. So, so it's entirely possible that even these people that you respect and are looking up to as helping you escape from drugs or anything like that, all these wonderful people who are helping you are also completely addicted to something and they have no way of actually dealing with that, or they are terrified of losing their jobs. So like, for an example, if a nurse gets caught being addicted to a substance, they lose their license, like flat out. A registered nurse, They just lose their license. That's it. Done. And if they are the ones who report themselves, it makes it easier to get their license back, is my understanding. So after all of this, so I mean, just keep in mind these are not bad people. They will lie, they will cheat, they will steal, they will do literally whatever they have to do to get their next fix of that substance, of that drug, whatever they're after, because to them, their brain is saying they need that right now. So imagine that you have not eaten in like 3 days, and that in this specific scenario, there's no system in place to give you more. So to like make the hunger pains go away, there are no ketones. There is no fat that your body is consuming in this way. Your reserves are gone, and the only way to make the pain of not having food go away is literally to eat food. There is no leptin, only ghrelin. And your ghrelin levels are through the roof. You feel like you're starving. The world is horrible. You need to get you need to get more, or you're going to have to consider alternatives, we'll say, to make the pain go away. If you get what I'm getting at. So it's a problem. Don't think about these people as bad, because they aren't. Their lives got they got way in too far. They made the mistake of going into a trap, and now they're trapped in that. That's it. The sooner they get through rehab, the sooner they become not addicted, or more that they are recovering, the better off they will be. However, there is actually a problem with any kind of addictive substance, which is you will also have what's called physical dependency. Physical dependency is scary as hell. What can you tell me about physical dependency, Terry? So I'm not just monologuing.
Physical dependence. Well, I do know that what some of them might know is it changes the actual physical like nervous system, like specifically number of receptors and how much neurotransmitters are being transmitted and how they're transmitted, if they're transmitted in the nervous system. Because as maybe everyone here knows already, there's the dendrites on the neurons has like a nice long tail, then ends in this nerve ending. I tried it wrong, but it's.
And for those of you who don't know, the dendrites are like the like electrical looking part that's coming off the top, not the long part, not the tail.
Yeah, the tail. So yeah, you get the neurons, they're connected, they have parts where they release a chemical into the synaptic gap between the receptor and the part of the cell that releases, then they absorb them. And the physical dependence comes in the form of the number of receptors actually increasing or decreasing based on how much usage there is. So if there's a whole lot of usage of a certain drug that causes a large amount of a certain transmitter to be sent into the synaptic gap, to compensate, the body might reduce the number of receptors. And if suddenly this drug use ends, then all of a sudden the amount of chemicals being released into the gap suddenly decreases to a normal level. But the body's not used to that and hasn't been used to that for a very long time. That's when you can get the side effects, which in some cases can be mild, like if someone's highly addicted to caffeine, they suddenly stop. This cold turkey the side effect is like a headache. And
Yeah.
that
Let me stop here real quick. So what we see on screen, this the difference between like the teal green and the yellow, that area there, that's called the synaptic gap. These little parts that are coming off the top that sort of look like hair, those are dendrites, I think. And then and then yeah, the terminal or whatever it's called. It's been a hot second. This part at the bottom, these little parts where there seem to be like the little pink balls are coming out of, those are terminal buttons, if I remember, or something like that. As I said, it's been a long time. Anyway, he's talking about receptors. So the receptors are these little points at the bottom. You can sort of see them. They look like a little, like, sort of third of a circle that's a little bit darker than the rest of the yellow. Sort of zoom in a little bit. And basically these pink neurotransmitters are coming down and they're connecting to these receptors. The pink neurotransmitters are being released by terminal buttons, which are these sort of I forget if the terminal buttons are each one of these big parts or not, but it doesn't really matter. Anyway, just keep in mind that the neuron is releasing these neurotransmitters, and that's filling this gap. And so those go into the gap. Those transmitters can get taken back up by the neuron that released them. They can be destroyed by stuff being released into the synaptic gap and just get rid of them. And the dendrite that's receiving them can also release stuff to sort of clear the synaptic gap as well. Okay, so now I think everyone sort of knows what you're talking about. Continue.
trying to find something.
So a big thing that happens with, so as Terry was saying, when it comes to physical dependency, just keep in mind that because a drug basically takes you from, let's go with just a number range that's pretty normal. So let's say your normal for most neurotransmitters in a healthy brain, we'll say, is a 5 out of 10 at any given time. Sometimes it will be 0 because there's just no reason for there to be serotonin in that synaptic gap at all, period. No reason to release it. But, realistically, it's probably going down to like a 1. So let's say on average, everything over the course of a day comes out to about 5. Over an entire 24-hour period, you average it, everything's 5. Okay, well, when you introduce a drug, for that day, you go from a 5 to like a 12 out of 10. Well, let's put it on the 20 range scale. Why don't we? So, okay, so you're a 5 most of the time, and then you take this drug and it goes up to like a 9 out of 10. 5 out of 10 to a 9 out of 10 for that day. That's how much of that neurotransmitter is in the synaptic gap at all times. Well, your brain typically wants to have some sort of state of normalcy. So it can sort of tell what is going on. That's a really big thing. Your brain knows that it's hot because it's hotter than normal. Your brain knows it's cold because it's colder than normal. Your brain knows that you're hungry because the amount of hunger to the ghrelin, the hunger hormone, relative to your leptin, your full hormone, is, out of balance. So if you're normally really so there's this there's this thing that happens, which is if you don't eat a lot of food on a regular basis, your brain will assume, for instance, that it's just normal for you to be kind of hungry. So that won't register to your brain as being a bad thing. So you meet people who are really thin, like this. However, if you take people who are very well fed, them having a little bit of ghrelin might make them want to go eat something right now. They might feel like they're absolutely famished. So your brain is always looking for some number, we'll say, some amount of a hormone that is normal. And then it is going to create or destroy receptors in dendrites, the hair coming off of the neuron. So that dendrite can basically just say, okay, this is normal. We want more than we need of the receptors because all the receptors should not be filled by that hormone, by that neurotransmitter. So when you get stuff now, what's kind of important is that there are things that can fill the receptors without activating them. So I forget what the neurotransmitter is that makes you feel tired. I'm not referring to melatonin that makes you want to go to sleep. There's another one that makes you tired, and I forget which one it is. Caffeine works by filling the receptors of that neuron, but not activating those receptors. So imagine that a receptor can hold a block of ice, but caffeine is just a rock that you're putting in that receptor, and it doesn't do anything for it. It just occupies the receptor. That's about it. So the problem with a lot of drugs is that they release a huge amount of a neurotransmitter, of a chemical, of a hormone, typically dopamine, sometimes oxytocin, sometimes serotonin, sometimes other ones. And the results of this is that receptor, remember that the receptors on a neuron do not want to have full capacity on everything. All of them should never be activated as far as your brain is concerned, unless it is an absolute emergency. So if they all are activated, that dendrite is going to say, we clearly don't have enough of these receptors, and it's going to make more. And it's going to keep making more until you're getting to like 75% capacity, something like that. It's going to get to where it can tell that it's not at 100% capacity all the time because of the drug, or that these spikes don't go to 100%. So this creates a problem because, again, your brain likes to find an equilibrium, a homeostasis, as you were probably taught the term in high school or middle school, or, at this point, elementary school, maybe. And the problem is that because it's always on a quest for homeostasis, well, now it also needs to start amping other things up. So let's take opioids, painkillers. We'll go with heroin. Let's take heroin. That basically, I don't know exactly how it works, so I'm just gonna freeball it. So we'll say that what it does in a scenario is it occupies pain receptors in your brain. We'll just say that because I don't know exactly how it works. And so with this, and remember, this is the one that's at the top physical harm and the top of dependence, so harm to society. Never do this one if you can avoid it. Never. But it basically makes it to where you feel less pain. However, again, your pain just went from a 5 out of 10 on average to by the way, when we say 5 out of 10, what we're referring to is on a pain scale. This is probably a 1 or a 0. That's a 5 out of 10 on our scale. So, because that's how many neurotransmitters are there. Okay, so your brain this heroin has basically said, okay, cool, we're going to make you feel amazing, and we're going to make it to where you don't feel pain. Okay, well, you just had your enjoyment just went from a 5 out of 10 on a regular basis to a 9 or 10 out of 10 on a regular basis. That's amazing. Your pain, how much pain you're feeling, just went from a 5 out of 10 to a 1 or 0 out of 10. That's amazing. And and this might be so enjoyable that you say, you know what, I like this. I want to do this more. I don't recommend it, but you might think that it's a great idea. Don't do it. Pro tip. But let's say someone does. So already, because the person's enjoyment just spiked and probably occupied all the neurotransmitters that it possibly can, and everything, like a bunch of stuff just maxed out, that creates an issue for the brain. Because again, that's not supposed to happen. Okay? Let me give you an example of when that would happen. A chimpanzee rips your arm out of its socket. Well, now your brain's pain response just went to a 10 out of 10. And it's 100% dumping adrenaline and endorphins into your body because something horrific just happened to it and it doesn't know what happened because the brain's actually not as in control as you think it is. And so it's panicking and it's basically screaming. Imagine it's a control center and then suddenly all of the consoles start flashing red and imagine everyone's running around screaming and panicking and they're just like hitting buttons. Like that's basically what's happening in your brain right now. It's like all the lights are flashing red and everyone's screaming and panicking. Like that's a pain just went to 10 out of 10. So so absurd. Yeah, basically I am going to die is what your brain thinks. So so now enjoyment is going to a 10 out of 10. So this is like children, this is not children, this is like teenagers who just had their first um we'll say fade to black experience with another teenager. Just going to make that absolutely clear. We'll just say a person has had their usually this happens in teenage years, which is why I said teenager. But a person has their first, we'll say, fade to black moment with someone that they are deeply in love with. There you go. Well, okay. So their pleasure, their enjoyment has hit a 10. And the brain says, I don't know what's going on, but I know I've released all these chemicals. I'm going to just make more receptors anyway. Because holy crap, this is so much oxytocin. Right? Okay, so again, your brain is trying to find homeostasis. It's trying to find that balance. Problem. Heroin, for example, your pleasure becomes a 10 and your pain becomes a 0. Your brain does not want your pleasure to be a 10. This isn't because your brain doesn't like you, it's because it needs some measure to tell how pleasurable something is. Otherwise, it's just everything is pure ecstasy. And your brain doesn't like that. And you wouldn't like that either. Imagine you walk outside, a breeze hits you, pure ecstasy. It's like, okay, thanks. Now, eventually, pure ecstasy means nothing. So, your brain creates more receptors. And eventually, taking heroin goes from a 10 to a 9, to a 7, to a 6, and then to a 5. And now, because you're hopelessly addicted to it, you need heroin to feel okay. We got a problem. Now, also, it causes you to not feel pain. Fantastic. You're at a 0 out of 10 pain. You feel great. You as a fat 400-pound person, can go run 20 miles while on heroin and you feel amazing. There's no pain at all. I mean, you hear cracking all the time in your knees and it's swelling, but it doesn't hurt. Fantastic. Well, okay. Well, problem. Again, your brain is saying, no, 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 I need to be able to feel some sort of pain so that I can gauge how damaging something is to me. So it's only a way that it can do that is to keep making more receptors that take pain hormones, or to just, well, actually, what it needs to do is, because now all those pain hormones are being effectively ignored, what it needs to, or occupied by stuff that's not making the pain be felt, what it needs to do is effectively start dumping more and more of a pain hormone into that synaptic gap, into itself, so that it can eventually get you to feel something. And it's going to make more pain hormone receptors, by the way, because again, it knows it's being damaged, but it needs to keep dumping pain into the synaptic gap, pain hormones, so that it can eventually start to feel something. And eventually, it will get to where it has enough receptors and it's dumping enough hormones in there to where some of the hormones are actually getting to the receptors. And now, when you're high on heroin, your pain eventually goes from a 1 out of 0, a 1 out of 10, to a 2 out of 10, to a 3 out of 10, to a 10, to a 5 out of 10. Remember, on this scale of 1 to 10 with hormones, a 5 out of 10 is like a 1 out of 10 on the pain scale. So a 1 out of 10 on the pain scale is like an itch, by the way. So what this translates to in terms of physical addiction in this case, or physical dependency, I should say, is that when you don't have access to the drug, things invert. So remember, it requires, with heroin, for example, it requires an enormous amount of the neurotransmitter to make you feel good, because the drug gives you an enormous amount. This is why people take more heroin. You're right. I mean, one hit isn't doing it. You just feel normal at one hit. How about 2 hits? And so that's why people overdose on these things, because they're chasing that 10 out of 10 amazing feeling, and their body is continually making it so that they need more of it to regularly hit that 10 out of 10. It has been said that with opioids, the time where the person will have the most enjoyable experience with them, don't do them, by the way, just reiterating, is the very first time that they use them. That is when they will have the absolute best experience with it. Don't do drugs. Don't do it. Trust me. You don't want this. Okay? 100% you do not want to do these drugs. They are bad. Okay? Cool. Good. Glad everyone agrees. So now that they aren't using the drug, remember the pleasure going to 10 out of 10, more stuff being made to bring that down. Same thing's happening with the pain. The pain's being not felt, so it's having to release more pain and make more pain receptors. So eventually that's getting up to that 5 out of 5. Well, when they're not on the drug, that inverts. So now their pleasure goes from 5 out of 10 to 0 out of 10, and their pain goes from 5 out of 10 to 10 out of 10. And we'll just say that 10 out of 10 pain, we'll just say that 10 out of 10 on the drug addiction scale corresponds to 10 out of 10 on the pain scale. So going from I feel nothing, no pain, to on the ground screaming and writhing and potentially falling unconscious from pain is the same, is a 10 out of 10 on the pain scale, and is a 10 out of 10 on our addiction scale. People coming off of opioids is just the worst thing ever. Trust me, I have seen it. You do not want that experience. Okay. To put it in perspective, it hurts to wear clothes. It hurts to breathe. It hurts to be under the covers. It hurts to lay down. It hurts to stand. It hurts to sit. It hurts to chew food. Everything hurts. You don't want that experience. Trust me. You don't want it. And now imagine that you're in a situation where you have no access to healthcare. Imagine that you were in a situation where you know that rehab is going to cost 40 grand. for 30 days, which is minimally viable. 60 days is considered viable. It is considered optimal, I should say. And 90 days is considered maximal. If you can, 90 days is the way to go. That'll also cost you around 100 grand. Not including all the medications that you have to be under. So that's a massive, massive, massive problem. However, there is another side of physical dependence, which I think Terry was going to eventually get to, which is what we see with alcohol. So outside of beyond the hormones and everything like that, there are certain substances that which will make themselves which can basically make it to where your brain is dependent on those chemicals being there. This is a problem. Because what that means, alcohol is one drug that does this, that I know for sure does this, which is essentially the brain starts integrating alcohol into into each neuron's basic functions. Meaning, if you don't have access to alcohol, those neurons effectively suffocate and die. Does this sound scary? Because it really should. Because what this translates to is if somebody is enough of if somebody is, well, I mean, they would be an alcoholic at this point, but if somebody is addicted to the drug alcohol to the point that their brain has basically become dependent on it, they cannot stop taking alcohol or they die. There are so many people out there who they become hopelessly addicted to alcohol to where they're like coming home and drinking a handle of alcohol, like what is that, like a 2 liters, 3 liters of alcohol? It's almost a gallon. And they're coming home and they're drinking like half of that for breakfast. And then they're going to work. They are driving to work, blasted drunk, blackout drunk. But because they're so effective at being drunk, that's normal to them. And so they drive to work. They don't get in accidents or anything. They are at work doing their job, which could be high risk, It could be a big manufacturing job where people could die if something goes wrong. And they have their little they have their little coffee mug that has their coffee in it. The coffee's vodka. And they're perfectly fine. And they go home and they finish off more of their coffee, quote unquote. And they drink the rest of their handle of vodka. And then they, eat dinner and then they go to bed and they get up and do it again tomorrow. Well, these people probably are physically dependent on alcohol. If their their coworkers catch them, let's say something happens and everyone gets drug tested and they show up as, extremely hot for alcohol. Like they are just 2 steps away from unconsciousness, basically. Well, that's a problem because they're working with heavy machinery or they drive a car for a living or they're a valet or something or they're a surgeon. And one mistake means people die or get horribly injured or at the very least the company gets sued. Okay, well, the company doesn't want any of that to happen, so they tell this person, "Hey, look, you gotta not be drunk when you come to work." So the person goes, "Okay, I got this. I'll go cold turkey." They're dead in 3 days.
And that's
3, 4
kind of
days.
what I was talking about earlier with the physical dependence and the psychology and the physiology anatomy of the cells changing, where
Yep.
it needs to have, where the alcohol has been, in this case, alcohol has been changing how much neurotransmitter is sent from one neuron to the other in this whole chain, and so the number of receptors is decreased or changed, and then when suddenly alcohol is taken out and the influence is gone, the body literally doesn't have enough of a response to keep the body alive. So that's why it would literally die, and that is true. Caffeine is a headache. Alcohol is you die. You
Yep.
unalive. Or the person unalives.
Yep, it
Yeah.
is super scary.
Yes. Very much so.
Yeah. So, yeah. For most people who end up going into rehab, the vast majority of them don't have the money to pay for it. But if it's court ordered, the court is going to force them to anyway. By the way, if somebody is court ordered to go to rehab, insurance typically doesn't cover that. Just so people know. So if you're ever in the unenviable position where you have a court case that's about a drug that you are addicted to, find a rehab that your insurance will pay for and go there. Tell the court, "Hey, my insurance is willing to pay for rehab in this other state. I can give you all the paperwork you need, but I want to go in rehab over there." The court 9 times, I want to say like 99 out of 100 times will just be like, "Oh, you're going to rehab? Okay, have them send us all the paperwork and you're good. You can go out of state to go there." Just keep in mind that you're still considered here in terms of jurisdiction concerning this case and that rehab facility. Because usually you can't leave the state when you have a charge against you, but they'll make exceptions. And the more things that you do to show that you're trying to be good for yourself to help yourself, the better off you're going to be. And if you are ever, charged with any kind of drug related crime, there's something, I think it's called 60/60s. Basically, every single city is going to have stuff like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, other groups that you can go to where people who are addicts can go to those groups and be around other people who were or currently are addicts who are trying to recover. And so, it's any kind of little friends group that you can form, that you can become part of, that will essentially allow you to, well, that is designed to help you get away from drug addiction. The more stuff you do that is proactive to help you, the better off you're going to be. The fewer things that you do to help you, if you're just like, screw this, well, I don't care. A lot of people don't care in the, a lot of people don't care in the beginning. They're still addicted. They don't care. They'd rather just go to prison, and then when they get out of prison, immediately reuse. So, it is what it is. It's bad because they kind of just lose like 10, 20 years of their life, but you know, sometimes they lose that 10, 20 years and they get out and they finally get off the drugs and they get their life together. And the thing is, a lot of people think that society is going to say, "Screw you, you were an addict who wasted 20 years of your life." That's not how it works. The vast majority of the time, your family will 100% take you back. Your friends will, when you call those friends that you alienated and they're like, "Man, what do you want?" And you say, "Hey, look, I was on drugs. I'm so sorry. I'm off the drugs now. Can I make it up to you?" You're like, "Can we talk?" Like, "I'm not on them anymore, and I feel really bad about what I did to you when I was on them." Like, the vast majority of people will look at that and be like, "Yeah, all right. Meet me at this Starbucks." Because humans in general like to assume that people have good intentions. So humans by default are optimists, not cynics. So, and we have this thing where we want to seek reconciliation whenever possible. Because I don't know if you guys have ever had this experience, but if you're really angry at somebody and or you feel like this intense sense of shame, you'll hold on to that for years, decades, until it gets resolved. And the thing is, at a certain point, you'll forget that you're carrying it around. That's what therapy is for, by the way. Um, and so when that eventually gets resolved, you'll feel so much better. It's crazy. So it'll feel like a weight is off your chest, basically. So it really is something where let's say you do go out there, you do fall into a trap, you do get addicted, you do lose 10 years of your life to addiction, and eventually you get clean, you get off the drugs, as they say, and you move on with your life. Like 100% reach out to the non-drug related people in your life and, you know, let them know that you're sorry and you hope that they can forgive you and that you're not on drugs anymore, and that if you ever do end up falling back into drug use, you will 100% tell them, hey, I'm falling back into something, so we need to just not be friends for a little bit until I figure it out. Like, people will generally respect you for that kind of stuff. Like, don't, whatever you do, don't just conclude that you're a bad person just because. That's completely erroneous. It's completely wrong.
Yes.
Anyway, anything that you want to add to that, Terry?
No, I think you did a very good job. You have a lot more experience and education on that than I do, so that was reflected. Just my little bit was just about the physical uh changes that nerves will have.
Mhm.
So that's all I really had. I think
Yeah.
now we could probably take a quick break and then jump back into Echo. Or did you
Just
want
in a
to?
second. And everyone out there, if you were ever interested in like pursuing mental health stuff, like you want to work in a rehab clinic or you want to work with mental health, a lot of the time you should be able to do this. Most positions, so there's things like MHT and BHT. This just means medical health technician and behavioral health technician. There's also RBHT or RHT, which is like a registered behavioral or mental health tech. Basically, they're the ones who have more of the training, and they would typically be working with higher acuity clients, patients. Usually, they're clients if they're in like a rehab or something, and patients if they're in some sort of medical setting like a mental hospital. That's the big difference. So, most of the time, unless it requires you to be registered in something, certified basically to have a certificate, those jobs typically only require a high school diploma or a GED, and they typically pay more than average for any area. So, like, if you're in Alabama, where the pay or minimum wage is probably still like seven something an hour, that mental health tech job might pay 20 or
Mm,
16. So, just keep in mind that, and the thing is, really, when you come in, these are the most entry level of entry level positions. And when you come in and it's their very first time, you're gonna be scared. You're gonna think, "Oh man, I'm gonna walk in. I'm gonna say the wrong thing, and some dude's gonna chew my face off, like just teeth right into my cheek, and that just isn't what actually happens." And typically, if it's in a hospital setting, you'll have, some sort of behavioral health hospital. You'll have nurses and staff around you all the time who can help you out. So yeah, there really should be situations where you can pretty easily get the help that you need. If you feel unsafe, there's usually places where you can go where you can lock a door and still see out what's going on and call for help on a button. So yeah, it's definitely there's definitely a lot there that can help you, and there are day and night shifts and swing shifts and all kinds of other things. So it's very much a system that is designed to try and keep you safe while also keeping the clients or patients safe. Very rarely should you run into a situation where you have to get physical. Very rarely. It can happen, mostly in hospitals, behavioral health hospitals, mental health hospitals. Um, I've always found that that kind of stuff is more common in like government run mental health hospitals because they kind of have to just take anyone. So the people who are the worst of the worst tend to end up permanently in those. You'll have stuff where it's like government run hospitals for the criminally insane. Like those are your interesting individuals who will remove your organs if they have the chance. If you get my drift. And yeah, with those, that's where you have like armed security guards and like all the staff have tasers and stuff like that. And the nurse will basically just walk in with a syringe full of sedatives and just jam it into someone's neck and inject them. Like, like that's where you run into that, where it's just like there's no real wiggle room. There's no loosey goosey with the clients with those. It's just like, nope, you're gonna do what you're told, or we're gonna put you to sleep for a few days, for like the next 12 hours. Those are your choices. So, but it usually doesn't get that far with the vast majority of stuff. So the good thing is that mental health places are almost always hiring, and they always need more people because people tend to burn out or they tend to move up the chain, or something happens and they have to move on. So there's lots and lots of stuff that can happen. But
Yes.
typically, there are a bunch of different types of places where you can go work. And my experience has also been that really between mental health places, they're not going to ask you about the previous job that much. They're not going to be like, hey, I need a reference from this previous place you were at. Just they're not really going to do it. They like let's say you went somewhere and something happened and you got scapegoated because a therapist didn't want to lose their job or a nurse didn't want to lose their job or something like that. Maybe the psychiatrist there really messed up and they scapegoated you. This hasn't happened to me, but if that did happen to you personally, like just keep in mind the other mental health places that you apply for, they're not really gonna they're unless they got registered somewhere. If you get scapegoated, it typically won't be registered. They will kind of just shrug and say, okay, well, you worked here for however many months or years, and now you want to work here. Sounds great. Welcome aboard. You want to come on in? You can probably come on in. We'll figure it out. So, they aren't really going to worry too much. And plus, they'll give you kind of crappy insurance, but it is what it is. But yeah, the general gist will be that you would work in those lower roles for a few years, maybe half a decade or something, maybe a few months, and then you move up to a different role. You go and you get more education. You keep going up. So, just keep in mind these things exist, and you can go work for them if you want to go work with people who are in rehab. Most rehabs are hiring, mostly because the more staff they have, the more clients they can take. So, yeah, is what it is. Do you have any questions or comments, Terry, before we go on break?
No, just can go on to break and then return.
Sounds good to me. Going to break in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Break time.